Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 107th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Toldos, all about Asaph and Yaakov seemingly steals the blessing from Asaph. I mean, there's a lot to talk about that, which actually we've spoken about in previous years. But I want to speak one aspect of this. It says, chapter 25, verse 27, it says, the boys grew. Asaph was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. Yaakov was a plain man, right? An ishtam, I guess translated as a plain man, dwelling in tents. So you have a total contrast, right? You have a total contrast of Asaph and Yaakov. Asaph considered the man who's cunning, the man of the field. Rashi, others bring down that he was able to trap women, to try and entice them. He killed people. He was an idolater. I mean, he did all the good things, right? Or all the bad things, depending on how you want to look at it. And Yaakov was a plain person. All right, the plain person, he dwelt in tents. What does it mean he dwelt in tents? He learned, right? He spent his time learning. Now, keep in mind, up until they were bar mitzvah, Asaph and Yaakov were the same. Couldn't tell Asaph from Yaakov, right? They were both bright. Seems Asaph may have been stronger in certain ways in learning than Yaakov was. Be that as it may, they are both the same. Pretty much they are both equal. But you see they went in divergent paths. Yaakov became the great Yaakov, who had, all these children, became the Shiftei Ka, the tribes, right? The tribes came out of Yaakov, and eventually they go down to Egypt, and they end up becoming, the Jewish people that, came out of Egypt and ended up accepting the Torah on Mount Sinai. Now Asaph went in a totally different direction. So the real question, I think that I really want to hit is how they go in such different ways. Weren't they both the sons of Yitzhak? Right? They were both the sons of Yitzhak, and the Torah says further, which is hard to understand. The Torah continues, and it says, verse 28, Yitzhak loved Asaph because he relished his venison, but Rivka loved Yaakov. So it's also hard to understand. It seems that he loved Asaph more than Yaakov, Yitzhak, but Rivka loved Yaakov more. So the question is, what's going on with Asaph? All right, what happened to Asaph? So one thing is that, so we'll give a little bit of history. What a Jewish child, what education, what they go through. Now, back then the Torah wasn't given, right? So many hold, the Talmud says, that the Avos, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov kept the Torah before it was given, right? Now, there's an obvious question. What does that mean? What did the Torah look like, at that point? Whatever it was, there was a direct connection between the father and the son, right? That they learned a tremendous amount from their parents. So in general, I'll tell you what goes on today. Child goes to school, and from a very young age starts 3-4 years old, right? And then they go to they go to kindergarten, then they go to first grade, all the way through, and they learn. They spend hours and hours. The boys, learning Torah. The girls also, what they need to learn. They learn a lot of laws, a lot of Jewish law. They learn Tanakh, a tremendous amount of Tanakh as well, Jewish philosophy. Where the boys, they'll learn Chumash, they'll learn Tanakh, as well. And then by 4th grade, 5th grade, they start learning Mishnah, and then they start learning Talmud, etc. before the Bar Mitzvah. And pretty much they're going to concentrate on learning Talmud. So normally a parent obligation, the father has an obligation. See, all you fathers out there, father has an obligation to teach their son. Right? Now, what if they can't? What if, like today, you have to make a living, right? You have to make parnasa. So what do? You don't have time to learn with your son. So we send, we send them to schools. The schools are like an offshoot of us. They're sort of the messengers, right, to help us if we can't teach them or we don't have the ability to teach them. And they're the ones that inculcate, the learning, the values, and all that. So the older they get, the longer they stay in school. It's a rigorous schedule, there's no question. There's no question about that. They go early in the morning, come back, even by bar mitzvah they'll be back at 6 o'clock at night. Once their bar mitzvah, they'll come back later. So they'll be there early in the morning till late at night. It's rough. And there are people there, their kids are just, they can't sit all day. They need, some other things to do to keep them fresh, whatever, but that's the system. That's what we have. So if a person thrives in that system, so good. If a person doesn't thrive in that system, there are going to be problems. That's why there are many different types of schools for different types of kids, because, not everyone can hack the system. It's definitely a rough system, in a lot of ways, but it is the system that we have, and it has produced generations of, learned people, and it works. For the most part, it works. I mean, can kids fall through the cracks? Yes. Can they have bad experiences? Yes. Can kids go off the derech? Meaning, can they leave the fold? Yes. There are issues, right? I'm not gonna, put them underneath the carpet. There are definite issues. So we know that Torah is not a Yerusha, right? Torah is not an inheritance. So even the person grew up in a religious family, and the parents are religious, the grandparents are religious, the father was a rabbi, his father was a rabbi, it doesn't guarantee that his kids are going to go necessarily in that path. Why? Because Torah is not a Yerusha. Torah is not an inheritance. It's something that you have to acquire. Because, when a baby's in the mother's womb, right? So the baby's being taught Torah by an angel, right? As it's brought down, the angel teaches it Torah, and then when the baby's born, the baby gets smacked by the angel, forgets all the Torah. So you can see a little bit underneath my lip here. You see like this little indentation there. Well, that may mean nothing, or that could be the place where the angel smacks the baby when the baby's born, and the baby forgets the entire Torah. So you could ask the question. If after the fact that the angel teaches Torah to the baby, what's the point of doing that if the baby's just going to forget it, right, afterwards? So one possible answer is to show that the Torah is not an inheritance. The Torah is not going to be given to you on a platter. You have to fight for it, right? So therefore, you're going to forget all your Torah, but at least in your DNA, all things being equal, you should have the ability to learn Torah, right? That learning Torah is going to make an impression. You may not remember anything, and you have to start from scratch. You have to start with the Aleph page. You have to start to read, etc. So you have to start from the very beginning. Okay, but we acquire Torah, from the very beginning. Take it step by step. So by taking it step by step, again, as we mentioned the schedule, right? You start by learning Chumash. From Chumash, you go, at least for the boys, they go to Mishnah, they go to Gemara, right? They go to Talmud. They learn Halach as well. They definitely learn Jewish law as well. Girls go a little bit different track, but there's plenty more to learn. Certainly for them to learn as well. And then everyone thinks, at least when I was growing up, the boys' bar mitzvah or the girls' bat mitzvah, right? At least in those circles, etc. So what happens? What happens is when they call to the Torah, so the rabbi there will say, because the father doesn't say it, but the rabbi will say, blessed am I responsible, am I exempt, for the punishment of this kid. So usually I remember growing up, everyone sort of laughs and chuckles, oh, that's very funny. But the reality is in some ways that's true. In some ways, he'll be exempt. The father will be exempt from punishment of the son, even though really the punishment doesn't come till the kid is 20, right? That real punishment for for that child, even though he's become a man, right? He's taken on the yoke of mitzvahs. Nonetheless, punishment will come later, for different reasons. But at the end of the day, the father is still going to be liable. Why is the father going to be liable? Because he's got an obligation to, once the kid becomes bar mitzvah, it doesn't mean you shirk off your responsibility. Doesn't mean you don't educate, right? Doesn't mean also you just leave the education to the, to the schools. You have to, a parent has to educate, as well, because even though the kid's in school most of the time, their real education is going to come from home. So again, is that a guarantee you're going to pass it down? No, it's not a guarantee. But at the same time, education continues, right, throughout the child's life. Now, you might say if the child is out of the house, child gets married, well, it's out of your hands, right? There's not much you can do, but a parent is always educating. Child can always ask questions, etc. But there is no off days. There is no, well, my child's not, no longer around, not my vicinity anymore, so I'm exempt. That's not true. I mean, it is to a point, but essentially, we still have to educate, our kids, regardless of how old, of how old they are, and what station of life, that they're in. I've heard many stories of great rabbis who, spend, their life, like learning with their kids, and teaching them and educating them and, etc. So, so that being the case, we're never off. We never have time off. We can say, oh, I'm exempt, so, whatever happens, happens. But the parent's going to pay the price for what the kid does. Now, it may not be our fault. Could be, let's say the kid has, God forbid, he's got a learning disability. Or something, something happens. Whatever the case is, and the kid doesn't flourish. And the kid actually flounders and ends up going sour. Now, there's a disease in this generation where kids end up going sour even from the best of homes. It certainly can happen. But at some level, and this is the scary part, at some level, the adults, parents, are going to be responsible for what the kid does. The kid's got free will, and after a while, he's not going to be living at home, so how can that be the parent's fault? Right? At some level, the parent's going to be responsible. Comes along Rav Shalom Stradron, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the Maggid, known as the Maggid of Yerushalayim. He used to go around Israel. He was a great rabbi of the last generation, and he used to go around Israel and outside of Israel and speak and give strength to, to people, to communities. And anyone who's ever seen the Maggid books, like the Maggid Speaks, by Rabbi Pesach Krohn, it's got 6-7 volumes. A lot of the stories of what he heard from Rabbi Schwadron had a tremendous influence on his life. In any case, one of his grandsons, I think, put out a few books on the Parsha by Rabbi Schwadron, by Rav Shalom, and it's called Lev Shalom. It hasn't been translated into English, but it's called Lev Shalom, literally the heart of peace. Nonetheless, in this week's Parsha, what does he say? He says that Yitzhak is at fault over here for what happened to Asaph. Let's go back to the original question. Why, how did Asaph go sour? Well, actually, answer the second question first. Is why did Yitzhak love Asaph more? Now, Yaakov was he's the son everybody wants. He sits, he learns, he keeps to himself. He's just growing in spirituality. He doesn't need any prodding. He doesn't need any help. He's doing great by himself. Right? So he's the great son that everybody wishes they had. That, he's on autopilot. I don't have to worry about him. But comes Esau. He understood that Yaakov was greater. He understood that Esau had a tremendous Yitzhak, had a tremendous evil inclination. Nonetheless, when he educated him, and he was able to harness this evil inclination, they were no different. Esau was just as great as Yaakov. Right? They were both the same. That's why his head goes into the cave of the patriarchs, but not his body. His body killed him. Right? His body caused him desire, caused him to go away from Torah. His head, though, understood what the right thing to do was. Nonetheless, says Rav Shalom says that when it came to Asaph, and Yitzhak put all his strength, all his power, into educating Asaph and harnessing that evil inclination and putting it to good use for the sake of Torah. What happened? He said, Baruch Sheptarani. Right? He said, I'm exempt now for educating him. So when he became Bar Mitzvah, Yitzhak was off the scene. Right? Yitzhak was out. And then Asaph did whatever he did and went off and became who he was. So says Rav Shalom. Shalom says that's a claim against what Yitzhak did. Yitzhak left. He left his son, not educated him after Bar Mitzvah. It's hard to imagine, right? If someone as great as Yitzhak and how much strength he put into his son, how could he have stopped at that point? Seems Rav Shalom says that that's what he did, and because that's what he did, Asaph went sour. He could have gone sour anyway, you may say, but as it's brought down, what he went through in his life, as hard as his life was, with his evil inclination, Yitzhak was able to be in control. Yitzhak was able to harness it in a proper way. Since he was able to do that, he kept him on the straight and narrow path. Once he said, that's it, I don't need to do it, I'm exempt, all right, that's when Asaph goes off. So this is something extremely important that we have to know, certainly in educating our kids. Right? The verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs says, Chanoch anar al pi darko. It says there's an obligation to educate our child al pi darko, according to his derech, according to his way. It doesn't say al pi darki. It doesn't say according to my way. Right? Our kids are not cookie cutters. Some are, but many are not. Right? In other words, you put them in the system, they fit the system, good. But not everyone fits the system the same. You have to educate them, not the way you think they should be educated, the way they need to be educated, even if, it ruffles your feathers a little bit. Even if they're a little more out of the box. You need to let them breathe. You need to give them what they need in order for them to flourish. If someone needs a break, or maybe needs a lot of breaks or whatever, you need to send, to a school that's going to cater to that. If you send him to a place where he just has to sit all day and he's not able to do it, you need to find some sort of compromise, in order that he's going to fit the system. Because the worst thing that'll happen is if a kid doesn't fit the system, and he knows he doesn't fit the system, he's not going to have any self-esteem. This is one of the probably single biggest problems today, is that kids don't have self-esteem, right? And what the Rebbes, what the girls teachers have to do is build up our kids, and build them up in a strong way, and giving them a tremendous amount of love and encouragement, where it has to come from the parents also, where the kid can flourish. Because the last thing a kid needs is to be put down or to be self-conscious or any of these things. I asked the great rabbi once, I said, if that's the goal, to build up our kids and say how great they are, aren't they going to get a swelled head? Aren't they going to become Bali Gaiva? They're going to be conceited. They're going to think they're God's gift to the world. So the rabbi said, yeah, halavai, that should be the problem. He said, I can deal with that also. Right? I certainly can deal with it. But that's not the problem. The problem is kids today have a tremendous amount of lack of self-esteem. They need a tremendous amount of love. They need a tremendous amount of guidance, but they have to be educated according to what they need. According to their way. Not according to what we think they need, because we could kill them. We certainly could kill them if we're not careful in the process. So, not only that, but in the teenage years, those are the most volatile years, right? If they survive that, then they're going to be okay the rest of their life, right? Regardless of what happens, because, hormones go crazy, it's peer pressure, there's a lot of things that go on that a child can get ruined, totally ruined. The parents, when it comes to kids, today, as great Rebbetzin would always say, my wife, would go to classes for years, in parenting, parenting classes. This great Rebbetzin would always say, You need to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. No matter what your kid comes home with, you can't react straight away. A lot of it is just, it could be hormones, it could be any number of things, that they're coming with. You have to listen. You have to take things in stride. When they calm down, you can deal with it. But regardless of what comes out of their mouth, it's a very hard thing to do. You have to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. Because if you're not like the Rock of Gibraltar and you act before you think about what you're doing, that's also, it's also bad news. So during these, tumultuous years, during the teenage years, that's even more we have to be there for our kids. They may hear things in school, they may see things, they need proper guidance. Sometimes the best thing to do is just, hopefully they're open enough that they'll talk. And when they talk, you listen. You see what they're going through, what their issues are. Right? And, again, it's rough. People could have bad teachers. Teachers could embarrass them. Teachers have the power to, make or break students. And, one bad comment, could kill a kid for life. Totally kill them and mark them for life. So, it's a tremendous responsibility. And even if the child, we have an obligation, to educate our kids. But even if they're not going according to the right direction, quote unquote, that we think they need to go through, we still have to be there for them. We can't look at them like, oh, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're a loser, you're this, or whatever. Even without saying it, if the kid feels it, it's also bad. But it's hard. It's hard because you see them struggle, and you see what they go through, and, it's not an easy thing for them to go through. It's not an easy thing for, a parent to see it. So, if a kid is struggling and doing things that, let's say aren't so good for himself, a parent has to make sure it's not going to have influence on the other kids. Now, the worst thing that a parent could ever do, is, or let's say better, before we get to the parent, the worst thing a school can ever do is throw out their kid, right? If the kid is doing detrimental things to the school and they've been warned or whatever, if the school has to throw out the kid, they better find another place to take him. Because if they don't find another place to take them, that kid is going to be messed up the rest of his life or her life, because they got thrown out. Whatever. It's just a bad experience. Oh, Chofetz Chaim, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, may his name be blessed, on the Torah. He's got a page, he's got an explanation on the Torah. So I forget exactly where this is brought down, but he says that the worst thing a school can ever do, and again, it has to be you need really big shoulders to throw out a kid. The worst thing a school can do is throw out a kid. If the school, God forbid, has to do it, they have to have another place for the kid to go. So the Chofetz Chaim says, there was a kid in school, in Jewish school. I don't know, wasn't doing so well, was goofing off, this, that. They couldn't work with the kid, they threw him out. Right? They threw him out. So what happened? So this kid went off, and he ended up spreading the word throughout the world of communism. Right? Communism, socialism. That boy's name was Trotsky. So the Chofetz Chaim said, imagine if they would have kept him in Cheder. If somehow they were able to keep him in the school. Again, I'm not saying, that if a kid's doing terrible things, he's been warned, there's nothing to do with them, it's a very delicate situation. But Trotsky got thrown out, and he went against the Jews, he went against everything, and how many people been sent to Siberia, killed, etc., based on this great system that Trotsky set up, which we'll call communism. So the Chofetz Chaim said, woe to the school that threw this kid out. Parents, this is also very tragic. If a kid's not going in the right direction, and the kid's having, could have a detrimental effect, on his other siblings, right? You don't want to have a domino effect. You got one bad egg. You don't want to have everyone, going down with him. At the same time, what, it has to be done with wisdom, exactly how to handle it. But the absolute last resort is throw the kid out. At least if the kid is home, there is hope that'll come back. Is there a guarantee? There's no guarantee. If he's doing detrimental behavior, right, that's, is detrimental to the kids, you have to get advice and good advice, from proper rabbinical authorities what to do in such a situation. Because on the one hand, you don't want this kid to have influence on everyone else. On the other hand, though, throwing him on the street, throwing him out, that's it. You're going to lose them, right? You lose them altogether. Is there a guarantee if they're in the house they're going to stay? No. No guarantee they're going to come back either, right? But a person, in this generation, you have to, it's all generations, but there's so many things going on, so many things that can take, our kids away from Torah, have to be very, very strong. And there has to be a tremendous amount of love. The home has to be fun. There has to be, tremendous shalom bayis, marital harmony, between spouses. It has to be a fun house. Kid wants to come there, etc. Bring friends over. Again, all this is no guarantee. But usually, if there's a problem in the house, that can cause a kid to go astray. If there's a problem with the kid's learning, right, he's got a learning disability, that certainly can cause the kid to go astray. If there are money problems, right, money problems also, can do that. Now, I don't know, too many people don't have money problems, some better, some worse, right, but that can also cause, stress in a marriage, and certainly cause stress in kids, right? So, there are a number of factors. I remember many years ago, I used to go walking around Jerusalem with my Rebbe once a week for like an hour, right? And so I'd be huffing and puffing trying to keep up with him. He's like 40 years older than me. So I would ask him like whatever I wanted to ask him, and he would, so one night I asked him this question about kids going sour, right? Or what we call kids going off the derech. This is years ago, right, when it started to become a problem. So I gave him like 10 different reasons, 10 different possible reasons why that could happen. So I said, it's that, So I said, so which one is it? So my Rebbe said, exactly. I'm like, what do you mean exactly? That wasn't a question. I gave you 10 different things. He says, yeah, it could be all of them. Could be one of them. Could be 3 of them. Could be any number of things, right? So whatever a person's going through personally in their own lives, the kids are going to see it. They're going to pick up. They're certainly going to, they're going to pick up on it. So you have to make the house, as fun as possible. It's not always easy. You have to make everything fun. Shabbos, should be nice. The holiday should be nice. Be able to take your kids out a little bit, let's say during the intermediate days of a festival. Go out with the family, do things. You do things to the best of your ability where, they're not going to look for fun elsewhere. The problem is, you can have all the fun you want right in the palm. See that? Right in the palm of your hand, right? You just have this gadget you look at. So, technology has destroyed many a family. I don't think there's any question about that. There are benefits certainly to it, but there's a lot of negativity. So if you have everything in the palm of your hand, that's a lot more fun. That's definitely a lot more fun than learning, than hearing a class, right? It's just it's mind numbing. I don't have to think, right? It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to do. And it's more enjoyable. It seems more, it's more enjoyable. So what we have to do to insulate our kids, to the best of our ability, is, to make other things that are kosher and allow them to do that, right? So, I'm always fond of saying if a person stays religious today, in today's generation, it's pretty miraculous. Because the verse says in Psalms, right, it says, stay away from speaking Lashon Hara, Sur Meira. And then at the end of the verse it says, V'asei Tov. Asei Tov means do good. So in this generation, staying away from evil, okay, that's already one level, right? That's even the main thing in this generation. Stay away from evil. Do good? Okay, that's like the cherry on top. So you got to say, wow, this is a pretty lame generation. We're pretty weak. Yeah, we are. I don't think there's any question about that. Very weak generation. But we have to do things to the best of our ability, right? In order that we ourselves become strong, we become better people, and we're able to pass that down to our kids. Is there a guarantee? There's no guarantee. But we have to give our kids the fighting chance, the best shot for them to succeed in Torah. And even if they don't succeed in Torah, you still want them to be, Torah Jews. You want them to be holding by Torah. Even if they're not going to learn, right? Even if they're not going to learn so much and they're going to work, they have to, be honest in business. They have to be immense. They have to have proper character traits. They have to treat other people, other people good, etc. So we want to inculcate, these values. Certainly these values to our kids, but we can't just say, okay, once they're bar mitzvah, that's it. We throw them out. We say, I don't have to do anything, so whatever happens, happens. Right? That's a recipe for disaster, right? It's hard to say that, that's what Yitzhak did, but that's what Rosh Hashanah Sardan Zatzal says, that he left them. But that is the crucial time. That is the crucial time when our kids need us the most. So, a person has to be prepared. I remember someone saying, when should a parent start learning, when should they start learning about child education? Right? So the answer is 20 years before they're born. Say, that's funny. Well, wasn't meant to be funny. But, the idea is, it's important. If we didn't get that proper education from our parents of how to educate according to the way the Torah says, what's right and what's really wrong, according to the Torah, then, there are a lot of good Torah books out there, about, educating kids. And we're living in very turbulent times. There's no question. We're living in very difficult times educating our kids. Because, there are so many things out there that, can take our kids astray. So we don't want to come too hard on them, because you come on too hard, they'll rebel. But if you don't discipline, then they'll think they can just do whatever they want. So you have to have, you have to have a balance. You definitely have to have ground rules or whatever. But, I think that the more exciting we can make things, a person sitting at the Shabbos table, we got different ages of kids there, right? So, I have from 20, 21 to 6, so, you got to speak to a 6-year-old, what a 6-year-old can understand into whatever, and, the older kids, you have to hit them and everyone in between. They have to speak at their level, right? So a lot of times, they'll speak, they'll ask things, whatever, and, that generates, conversation, but it shows, A, that the kids are thinking, and B, that, you want to make it open enough where, not so open till your brains fall on the floor, but, you don't want them to be stifled. Today in schools, in general, someone asks a question like, what's the purpose, that God created the world in 6 days? People say, he's a heretic. He's an absolute heretic. What's he asking it for? He's asking because he's got a question about creation. Right? He's got a specific question about creation. It's not to be a heretic. He wants to know what the answer is. Right? In a deeper way. It doesn't mean they're asking to rebel. Kids, there are many kids that have questions. But when their questions, if the Rebbes or the women teachers, the Mores, don't have answers, they should say, I'm not sure, I'll look it up or whatever. But, they're afraid to even open up the discussion because they're afraid where it's going to lead to. Now, it depends what the question is. If it's a question of Jewish philosophy, right? Why should a kid feel stifled? Either they'll say, see, the Torah doesn't have answers. And then they'll always feel the questions never get answered. Or if they're brushed off and say, like, why are you asking that? Like, what's your problem? Are you normal? And the answer is, yeah, they are normal. They have a legitimate question. I'm not talking about someone asking to ask, and trying to get out of things or whatever. They're asking because they have a deep-rooted question. So the Rebbes and the Moras need to know how to deal with it. You can't just say, don't be a heretic, go away. The kid's not going to learn anything from that. He's going to learn, what he will learn is that the Torah doesn't have answers. That's the worst thing that a kid can learn. That's the worst message. And the reason it's the worst message, I think, is very simple, because you give off that message, what's going to happen is, the kid will think that, Torah's not deep, and it's just, there are no answers. We just keep it anyway, kind of like being a Christian. I believe, right? You just believe, and that's it. Well, that's not what the Torah is. Torah is about belief with knowledge. It's about belief with understanding. Now, there are things that, maybe Kabbalah. There are things that, are deep, philosophical questions that, probably the commentary has been discussing, for the last 2,000 years. There's nothing new under the sun. It's not going to be like it's a new question. The question is, how we deal with it. So, teachers have to know where to be open and where to be closed. But many today are just closed because they don't want to open up a Pandora's box, and think all these kids want to rebel when really someone had a legitimate question, and, that there are programs trying to deal with this, because sometimes, in girls' schools and boys' schools, they don't get, boys' schools for sure not, but, they don't get this ability to ask these deep philosophical questions. They're pushed aside, or they'll think they're a heretic, or they're afraid to ask for any number of reasons, and they go throughout high school. They finish 12 years of schooling without getting these questions answered. So, there are people trying to deal with this issue. I think it's tremendously sad because, a lot of times it's coming from a good place. They just have a legitimate question, and they want a legitimate answer. They definitely want a legitimate answer. So pushing them off is not helping them. Thinking that they're heretics is not helping them. They want to live within the system. They want to do, be the best that they can be. Give them an answer. If you don't have an answer, find an answer. Go to someone who knows the answer. Or give them a book to read, or whatever. You got to do something. You cannot leave them, hanging. So that's what I think Balei Tshuva, Jews that didn't grow up religious, that became religious, I think in certain ways have an advantage. Right? They have an advantage because they were already exposed, to all this stuff. To a lot of it. So most of them were probably, deep thinkers, looked into a lot of these things, read these deep books. They got the answers, and that's how they became frum, because it made sense. It totally made sense. But their kids aren't thinking like that. They're not fighting. They're not fighting against the tide. What are they're coming into it, in purity. They're coming to be the best they can be, starting from the youngest age. Right? Balei Tshuva start much later. Start in their 20s, start in their 30s, whatever. Whenever they come to Torah. Their mind, the more open, they've been exposed, to more. So in certain ways, with people growing up, what we'll call FFB, that they're from birth, so they're at a disadvantage. They don't know these things. They've only been brought up in Torah. So I think that's a definite benefit. They don't have this other garbage. At the same time, it doesn't mean you have to be a robot. It doesn't mean you're just doing things because you're doing things. The Mesilas Yesharim, the Ramchal, in Path of the Just, at the very beginning, the introduction, says that this is one of the worst things that a person can do, is do things by rote. Right? A person does things by rote only because he's afraid he's going to fry in hell forever. At a very simple level, the Ramchal says it's called being disgusting and being an abomination in God's eyes. Because you're You're not even thinking what you're doing. All right, person made a blessing. You made the right blessing. You get credit? You got credit. We're not talking about having Kabbalistic intention. But you're doing things because you're afraid you're going to fry an owl forever. And this is what I do. This is how I grew up. This is what I do. But did you ever think about what you're doing? Did you ever try and live inspired? Did you ever try and go beyond what you're doing? Try and become even better? No. So that's bad. That's bad. And there are a lot of people today that growing up, they have no idea what they're doing. They're just doing because they're doing. They don't want to be they want to be like blemished. They want to get good shidduchim. They want to marry good people, and all that. But deep down inside, they're really empty. They're just really doing things because they're doing things. Okay, this is what I do. I get up, I pray, I eat the matzah. I put on tefillin. Right? If you're a guy, you sit in the sukkah. You do all these things. But the reality is they're not that religious. Because God's not really in the picture. They don't have what the Ramchal says. They're not an Oved Hashem. They're not serving God to reach the highest potential, to do what they're obligated to do. Right? So he sets up how to get to that level, and to understand what we need to do, in this world. Right? By learning Musar, going into nature, understanding that God runs the world, and living inspired. They're going to say, Rabbi, listen, I'm tremendously in debt. I have all this difficulty. I got pain in my joints. I got all these illnesses, different things. How can I live inspired? Right? It's hard. I didn't say it was easy. Right? We're not even going to get into it in the next 6-7 minutes. We're not going to get into it. The point is that we say every day, Machadish b'chol yom tamid. Right before the Shema, God renews creation. So we are like a new creation on a daily basis, right? So if I messed up yesterday, today's a new day. But, I have to do things like it's fresh, like the Torah is given today. Now, this is a very hard thing to do. People have mood swings, people are in debt, people have have problems with their kids, problems with their spouse, whatever. You have problems all the way around. Nobody has it easy. Certainly nobody has it easy. At the same time, it doesn't matter. God gave us all these situations for us to deal with, but we have to do everything to the best of our ability. So yeah, talk is cheap. You got to put your money where your mouth is. Also true. Also definitely true. But the Ramchal says if you don't do that, and you don't work towards that goal, and he tells you how to do it, right, step by step, so you can get to Ruach HaKodesh. At the end, you can get to divine inspiration. Right? I'm giving a class once a week on this. On Path of the Just. So anybody interested, I'll send it out once a week. $25 a month. It's going to change everybody's life because it's all about what my purpose is in this world. What I'm doing and how I can get there by changing what I do, by having a higher reality and living it. Right. So I just gave the first one today. I didn't get through the entire introduction. Hopefully by next week, finish up the introduction. But it's real powerful. And, what he says over there is, I'm not telling you anything new. Right? All this stuff I'm telling you, you might get something out of it. But the only way you're going to get the most out of it is if you continue going over and over and over and over, time and time again, you're reliving and relearning all these different things of stuff that we already know. We just don't put effort into learning it, into putting it in our everyday life because, it's such a simple thing. It's not like a deep thing. It's something we all know. But even if it's something we all know, if we don't put the best effort in, and we don't realize what our obligation is to God in this world, then you're doing things like a robot. And if you're doing things like a robot, as Ramosha Schneider, Zeichem Tzadik Livrocha, his name be blessed, my Rebbe's Rebbe, the rabbi of Eitz Chaim in London, of the yeshiva of Eitz Chaim, said a person cannot learn Torah like mathematics. If he does, he's called a frummer student. A frummer student means that you're learning Torah like any other subject. It just has no effect on your life. It doesn't cause me to change. So Rebbe says, and Rebbe Schneider says, that's not called Torah. It looks like Torah, smells like Torah, but you don't get the merit for learning Torah. What happens is that it's like mathematics. So if I learn mathematics, it doesn't have any effect on my life. So that's what it is. So that means that there's something lacking, that there's something spiritually lacking in yourself that's stopping you from going and reaching, higher heights that a person, that a person can do. To the extent where he says, if you do things like a robot, you do things, you do things exactly because, that's what I did yesterday, it's what I did the day before. You're sort of on automatic pilot. That's an abomination. That's called being disgusting in God's eyes, right? So, again, looking at everything fresh, living every day to the fullest, yeah, there are a lot of things that stop us from doing that. Doesn't mean that's not our obligation, right? So, so in short, educating our kids is a top priority, right? And we have to educate them in the Torah the best way we can. And even if, and this is even harder, even if they're not going in the way we think they should go, right? You still have to show respect for them. You still have to love them unconditionally, even if it's hard. Even if it's hard what they do. It's rough. I don't think there's any question. Someone who has a child that goes sour. I don't think there's too many things more rough than that. It's, they're going against everything you stand for and everything the Torah stands for. It's a hard thing to watch. It's definitely a hard thing to watch. At the same time, you pray a lot. You hope they come back. You hope they come back, and whatever level they come back, you should be happy. But we look at things as, how's it going to look to the family? How's it going to look at my family if you want to try to marry off kids? We look at it, look at things in selfish ways when, the reality is they're our kid, they're suffering. And, we can't, sometimes we just can't help them. And, they're caught up in their own things, and it makes it very difficult for us to help them. So at the end of the day, as we mentioned the verse in Mishle in Proverbs that says you have to educate them according to what they need, even if it's what we don't think is necessarily good, per se, or what we want. It has to be what they want, and doesn't mean we don't have to educate them, to the best of our ability, but we have to know how. We have to know what's going to be good for them, and help them strive and become the best Jews that they can be. I want to remind everyone I have a intro to Kabbalah class that we're doing the last fundamental essays on Derech Hashem, the way of God. We're going to speak about Moshe and prophecy, we'll speak about miracles, other things coming up. That's every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock New York time. I have 2 question and answer sessions. That one on Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning New York time, which we just did a little bit earlier. Thursday, 2 o'clock New York time. Every other week I do Tanakh Talk. It's now going to be, I guess, on Sunday nights or Monday nights. Just did a Tanakh Talk thing about spiritual forces, demons, etc. I also give conversion classes. Noahide classes. Take a look at Beyond Orthodox Conversion in Judaism, Beyond Noahides, or orthodoxconversion.com. And as I mentioned before, I just started a class that's not live. It's once a week. I send out an MP3. I just did the first one on Path of the Just by the Ramchal, what we call Mesilas Yesharim, famous book on ethics by the Ramchal, which I think everyone will enjoy. That's $25 a month because it's once a week. And anyone who wants to contact me, feel free. You can contact me at rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN, right? That's the way my father spelled it, at gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.